Are you struggling to balance your modern life and your faith? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Legacy Dads Podcast with Lance and Dante, offering biblical-based wisdom and that weekly dose of what truly works in men's lives. The Legacy Dads Podcast, real men, authentic faith. Here are your hosts of the Legacy Dads Podcast. They're authentic, transparent, and not always politically correct. Lance and Dante.
Lance, I'll just tell you, I went away this weekend. We were boating. We were at a friend's summer cottage. There were, 9 kids. No, that's not right. There was.
Wait, when you say boating, is this the picture of the yachts and it's like we're all in this together?
No. It was a power boat. It was 7 kids and 6 adults, and there was a lot of food. There might have been some wine. There was definitely a lake, and I spent, all day Saturday tubing, boating, cooking, and teaching young kids how to water ski. And then Sunday, awesome. After church, we got up and I hopped on the speedboat, got nothing but kids. So it was me and all of these 7 kids, and we went tubing for 2.5 hours. And, everybody said, "Oh, what a great weekend." And I mean, granted, my adult friends, they'd invited us up there. I had a blast, but I got to tell you, as a parent of young kids to teenagers, I was flipping exhausted. I felt more like a butler by the time I left than, anything else like that. I needed like a parents' weekend after the kids' weekend. You ever have that, Lance?
Yeah.
I mean, you got like adults now, but you ever get that point where you're just like totally just mentally fried from a weekend that you just spent like serving others?
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, I need a vacation from the vacation.
How are things going out in cool Arizona right now?
Yeah. So, speaking of tubing and boating, that's all banned here because
you can't do that. You can't tube and boat. I probably shouldn't tell you the state that I was in when I was doing.
No, your wife even commented. She's like, "Really? Like tubing? You can't tube? Like what? You're an outdoor floating on a river. How is that?" And I'm like, I was like, "Kate, I have no idea. I don't know what the logic is behind this, but apparently tubing is bad." So, and
tubing is bad. Gay pride and looting and violence is good.
So don't even get me started. That was the frustrating part. So we get because of where I work, we get the COVID statistics, and when we started having upticks in this, they were like looking at they did the contact tracing to see like, okay, where do people contract these cases, and in my county, almost, I would say an overwhelming majority of the cases came from people that went to protests. And it's like, now, okay, great. I get it. I believe in your First Amendment right to go protest. But now you brought the COVID back, to our county, and now our state's shut down again for another 30 days. So thanks.
Things that make you go,
Yeah.
Anyway, let's get a little business out of the way. Legacy Dads is your weekly dose of biblical manhood. This podcast is for men, husbands, and fathers in all stages of life, where we promote and advocate proven biblical principles for leaving a lasting legacy. And let's be honest, all the gals that are hiding out there, moms, grandmas, young ladies trying to get the inner secrets of what goes on in a men's brain and legacy dads, we know you're there. We support you and all that as well. Lance, this one here, we're talking about right now in this podcast. I mean, let's be honest, and let's really just talk about the state of affairs that we're in. Racial divide, discord, disunity, fits of anger, all look to be dividing this great nation. This nation obviously has many problems, but we have to remember that we are one of the oldest living democracies in the world. Mm-hmm. Not the, but one of. And we see hope has been replaced by anger. The pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness has been replaced by a pro-communist media hell-bent on discord, disunity, and citing anger, fear, and especially anxiety. I mean, we have to realize that America was built on an idea. The idea is that human beings are made in the image of God and therefore beneficiaries of inalienable rights, God-given rights, that government was created in order to protect these rights, not invade them, and that we must use our freedom in order to pursue virtue. These thoughts gave us the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution of the United States of America. Lance, I feel strongly about this. And in the Congress of July 4th, 1776, the unanimous declaration of the 13 United States of America, when in the course of human events, it became necessary for one people to dissolve the political bands which have connected them with another and to assume among the powers of earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and the nature of nature's God entitled them. A decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to this separation. We hold these truths, this Congress said, to be self-evident that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator and certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is a right of the people to alter or to abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and according to its powers in such form as them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Somewhere along the line, Lance, we lost this. I mean, I look back and I was watching video of 9/11. It happened where we had an unknown foreign enemy in a foreign, country that had our people, firemen, police, officers, rescue, first, responders running into burning buildings, knowing that surely these buildings were coming down, causing any safety to be cast to the wind and doing what's right. And we saw a nation fearful, bent on its knees, come together in unity. And I look at where we're at right now and the state of the affairs that we're in, and we have a domestic enemy right now, Lance. And we can sit there and we can say, the Communist manifesto. We can look at, the intention of that to destroy the family as we know it. We can look at the media and how they propagate, some of these communist principles. We can look at some of these politicians that promote socialism, democratic socialism, and or propagate communism. And the reality of it is, if we're all just blatantly honest, Lance, it comes down to the fact that it's really the core is sin. And with that comes pride, and with that comes anger. And so, Lance, I mean, we can talk about so many things that are wrong. Where do you see things, Lance? Where are you at in all of this?
Yeah, I mean, I'd agree. It's scary times. I don't think I've seen division like this in my lifetime. This is the most divided we've ever been. And I literally know people who are preparing for conflict. People are thinking it's that bad, that it's going to get to the point where they've got to defend their family and their home, because the government's going to be coming for them. Now I don't want it to go, I don't want it to come to that. I think that's really bad, but I think that's where we're headed. And when I see, we've seen on this in the recent years, you've seen this escalation, what started off as, arguments and shouting matches, then they turned into protests and violence and looting. And then you have, you've got, and it just keeps escalating. And you have people like this college professor who taught ethics, of all things, who went to a protest at Berkeley and hit someone in the head with a chain and a bike lock. This is a college professor teaching kids classes on ethics. I can only imagine what his ethics class are like. But this guy gets charged with 4 counts of felony assault with a deadly weapon. And I think, as you brought out, Dante, there's a lot of people have forgotten, or they just maybe don't have a good grasp on history of why we founded this country and some of the things we did. And I think there's some underlying issues in our country, and we're going to address these in this podcast and how we can course correct. So we're calling this podcast How to Fix America. Now, to start this off, I want to talk about, and I've been posting this on social media recently, But there are 4 false premises which are being propagated and taught in schools, or being parroted by the media and entertainers, and they've even pushed by some politicians for their own personal gain. And I think what we need to do is we need to get educated. We need to recognize when people try to, put these false premises on us, and we need to call them out. And we need, and you need to say, like, no, that's not right. What you're doing is false. You're just trying to use these, manipulation tactics to divide us. And if you guys don't remember, you can go back and listen to it. We did a podcast on how, we're manipulated. It's called The Ways We're Manipulated. You can go back and listen to that podcast to get more on, if you're interested in some of the specific means in which they use to manipulate us. But to bring up this first false premise is that the world is basically divided into 2 groups, and you're either an oppressor or you're oppressed. And then the people that believe in this kind of ideology, then they further break this down into groups along lines of race and class and gender or sexuality or a host of other factors. So it's basically like, if you're white, you're an oppressor. If you're African American, you're oppressed. If you're a man, you're an oppressor. If you're a female, you're oppressed. And they want to just categorize people into these nice little neat categories, and it has nothing to do with the way you've acted, the things you've said, what you've done in your lifetime. It's basically, if you are this gender or you're this color, you fall into this category. And so people they're categorizing people by these, their group affiliation rather than the individual circumstances or actions. So it's like saying, okay, if you're, and I've used this example before, but, if you live in a trailer park in Alabama and you're white, you're an oppressor, but Barack Obama with all his, millions of dollars is oppressed. And I think to me, that's kind of really, like, I don't think I can't really buy into that ideology, but that's kind of what this ideology is pushing, Dante, is that, there's only 2 groups, and you're either oppressed or you're an oppressor. And then we're going to break you down we're going to decide which group you're in based on the color of your skin or your socioeconomic class or your gender or whatever factor we decide. But that's what we're going to categorize you in. And you see this polarization on social media and in the news media and everywhere else, is people are trying to propagate this idea that that's all there is. You're either an oppressor or you're an oppressed. And I think this is what leads to that victim mentality. I don't know, Dante, what do you think on this?
Lance, if I'm being really honest, and for my listeners, forgive me for saying this, but it truly pisses me off. Mm-hmm. I hear stories of some church folk that apologize for their ethnicity or apologize for their quote unquote privilege. And it just, as I look at that, and we talk about critical thinking, and we podcasted on that, we've talked about looking at world events and looking through the world through a biblical lens. To apologize is to sit there and say that the creator God of this universe made a mistake in creation. Mm-hmm. Now, Lance, you and I are procurers of the Word of God. We memorize, we study, we look at it. And from Genesis to Revelation, I see there's a love story about a God who gave us a way through his son, Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. And that is rolled out through the whole Genesis to Revelation narrative, through many different subsets, different stories, and different different comments and factual times through history. And the idea is that as we look at this, there's a common thing that goes on. We're sinful. We're separated by God because of our sin, but God doesn't make mistakes in anything that he does. To apologize for that is certainly a false premise. And to sit there and say that I'm going to broad brush somebody that is either an oppressor or oppressed is a lie from the pit of hell. Because here's why. We all fall short of the glory of God. We all are sinful. Not one of us are perfect. And thereby, if you have one class of people classifying one certain person as oppressor and the other as oppressed, automatically that person is putting themselves in the moral high ground. i.e., they're making themselves godlike, that they can just with a wand or with a pen or with a computer or with a media outlet can dictate who is the oppressor and who is the oppressed.
Yeah, and we know one of the things that frustrates me on this too, Dante, is that we kind of see what I hear people saying is that it's pervasive amongst society, right? Like the whole system, the whole democratic system that our country was founded on is rotten to the core. Everybody's a racist. Everybody's a bigot. Everybody's an oppressor. And so we just need to tear it down and start over. And I'm like, I keep asking, I'm like, you're basically saying that 300 years, we haven't gone anywhere in 300 years of history. You're basically saying that, every advancement that we've made in our country for either equality or for rights or for wars we fought over things like slavery, all of those were for nothing. And we basically live in the most oppressive and racist society there is. And I hear people saying this on social media, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Have you ever been to somewhere like Saudi Arabia? Have you ever been to a place like Iran where you can't even go outside without wearing certain clothing or you get beat by people?
There was a video of a woman that was just dancing in one of these countries that you're mentioning, and out of nowhere, this guy comes in this recording and just like as hard as he can, and it wasn't like a layman's kick. It was a military or an informed, martial arts kick to her chest and knocked her across the room because this one individual deemed that dance as provocative. And the idea is that you just literally saw somebody take away the rights of somebody else. And so, Lance, when I hear that and I hear these revisionists that want to erase history of where we come from, it just mesmerizes me to the ignorance of people that they just take Wikipedia or social media as true gospel versus being a student of history and looking at even some of these statues that are being torn down and not even doing research on what you're tearing down. For some of what these people that you've torn down has stood up for the very things that you're trying to quote unquote protest, yet you're not protesting for the things that you truly desire. You're protesting for hate and discord. And if you sit there and say, well, that's not me because now I'm woke and, I'm a woke church and I'm a woke member and now I'm going to stand behind these groups, be very careful who you try to liberate as one of these groups, because if you really listen, if you research the writer of the book, you may love the story or you may love the revision, but if you truly understand the polity of this person or the lack of faith in this individual, or even worse, God forbid, the hate in these groups that you're all of a sudden promoting, be very careful when you sit there and get behind because you're making a decision based out of guilt or the media is shaming you in the way that you were raised, because you've got a problem, and the problem is sin, and we need to deal with the core issue versus dealing with what people are trying to shove down our throat.
Yeah, and if you haven't, listeners, if you haven't been out of the United States in a while, I was just in, overseas a couple months ago before COVID hit, and I remember this was big news where this was in the major soccer leagues. I believe it was the either the Champions League or the Premier League soccer. You had soccer players, African American soccer players, when they would walk on the field, the entire audience would start making monkey noises. And I'm like, this is not, if that happened in the United States, we're not doing that in the United States. There's other countries who are doing things that are far, far worse than what's going on. So to paint this broad brush stroke that everybody's a racist or everybody's an oppressor, I just don't buy into it. And Dante and I have said over and over on this. Are there racists? Absolutely. Are there oppressive people? Absolutely there is. But it's not the entire system. And the entire system, I keep asking people, if we have a racist system, show me the law. And I guarantee 99% of the country will stand behind you and we will get rid of that law. We will change that law if that's a racist law. But again, when you just say platitudes, I heard this on TikTok or Facebook, so I'm just going to parrot it. That doesn't buy it with me. I'm like, I gotta see some factual evidence of this. But anyways, you got me off on a soapbox here, Dante. What do we got for the? So
well,
we got,
real quick though, before I get to the next one,
Yeah.
I don't care, listeners, men, women, grandfather, grandparent, children, brothers, sisters, blue, red, independent. I don't flip and care what your background is. Before you try to pass one thing on the president, who I'm not going to defend or reject, or this politician or that politician, please, on the basis of trying to leave the legacy that we're asking you to leave, is do your due diligence. Look at who are the ones that form these Jim Crow laws. Who is the one that disincentivized, minority groups and not giving them the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, and taking away that, and do the merit of the party by which that you're trying to defend, or the party that looks like they're the innocent in this and that actually have the blood-stained hands.
Yes.
And let's have an honest conversation, and let's stop drinking the flippin' proverbial Kool-Aid and really put on the biblical lens and call a spade, and call a heart a heart, and call a club. But let's have an honest conversation. That being said, the second false premise, Lance, now that I'm on my soapbox, is oppressors dominate the oppressed by using hegemonic power and imposing their ideology on everyone. Again, your affiliation as an oppressor or oppressed is based solely on your group, not your individual actions. People who buy into this false premise also state that their oppression can occur merely by one's values, beliefs, and ideas. By the mere fact that you identify as a Christian, your beliefs are oppressing others.
Yeah.
So it's like my kid running into a drawer that I left open in the kitchen and yelling at that drawer that they've offended their rights.
Yeah.
No, you ran into that drawer. Let's talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. The fact is, no, you ran into that drawer. The consequences on you, not on somebody else, and how they made you feel.
Yeah, and the scary thing, we're seeing this right now, Dante, with and this is I'm for people that say they're woke. I'm like, how are you not woke to things like, okay, you've got major media outlets who are advocating for the censorship of conservatives because they don't agree with their political views. They're basically saying, if I don't agree with what you agree with, then I want to use law and corporations and power to censor you, so I don't have to listen to that. Some of this stuff is scary, and I tell you right now, Christian, mark my words, they are coming for the churches. And it's either whether that's the 501c3 status, and I think with some of these Supreme Court rulings you've seen recently, I guarantee we're a few months away from a court case where you're going to have either a church or a Christian-based organization or a Christian-based school that's going to be sued on discrimination, and basically they're going to have to either hire somebody that's against their statement of faith, or they're going to be put out of business. And that's honestly what I'm scared of. Is you have a faction of people, Dante, in this country who are saying, I don't like what you stand for. I don't like your Christian beliefs. I don't like your your patriotism. So I'm going to do everything within my will to destroy that means for you to be able to express yourself or to express your beliefs or value system. It's serious oppression, but the thing that people are doing, they're the ones who are oppressing people, but yet they're labeling you in the media the oppressor, which is boggling to me, how the ones who are controlling and doing all the oppression are then acting and playing the victim card. Does that make sense to you, Dante?
Yeah, it's called switch and bait, or, we've talked about these different things of like, the reality of it is I'm the one doing these things, but wait, I'm going to change the narrative and say, no, Lance, you're doing that to me.
Yeah.
And it's hypocrisy at the least. At the worst, it's the idea that if we look at our founding fathers and the issues that we had in this country, I mean, Lance, you and I talked about a Facebook post that I had, and I said a comment about a U.S. president and about personal accountability and values which you and I are both trying to instill in our children. Not only to have a relationship with Jesus Christ, but to be accountable for your actions. You got to obey the laws of the land. You've got to submit to the authority that's before you. You've got to respect your elders. You've got to be accountable. And if you're going to do something that goes beyond those rights that you were given, then you've got to pay the piper. And the reality of it is somebody, got in there and just all of a sudden made this about racism. And I just kind of looked and I'm like, did I miss something? Look back. Okay, what was this comment? When did the president say these things? What was his speech? And no, it had nothing to do with 1 ounce of racism. But because of how they're being, programmed and how they're being, like this oppressor mentality, they're buying the Kool-Aid and they're drinking it. And not only are they drinking it, they're just totally, woofing the whole false narrative down, and lock, stock, and barrel being manipulated by this whole mentality that you have going on, which is simply completely and unfactual. And the idea is, people, please do your homework. Study history, because the beautiful thing about history is if we look at, good, bad, ugly, and different of past history, the importance of history is that we don't go back and make the same mistake twice.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to leave that alone because I'll get off on a rabbit hole if I start talking about that. So the third false premise, that this ideology is kind of, professing is that lived experience. So experiences you have in your life, emotions you feel, and feelings are more credible. Those are more important and more creditable than things like science, objectivity, or evidence. So facts don't matter. My feelings are what really matters. And people who buy into this ideology argue that my lived experiences gives the oppressed people, because it's usually the oppressed people who are saying this, I have special access to truth about oppression that oppressors can't refute. So it's kind of like, and I've heard this argument. It's like, well, you're white, so there's nothing you'll never understand. And you can't empathize, and there's nothing you can do because you don't get a say, basically, because you're in this group. And
how dare you try to speak on this subject?
And it's like, and I've heard this argument with, the whole argument of, well, it's not your body, so you don't have a choice. Really? So then it's not your gun, so you don't have a choice. The argument that just because, whatever, I'm not even going to go down that rabbit hole, but so it's basically saying that if you're in the oppressor group, that you can never really know or empathize with the oppressed. And it's almost like saying there's nothing you can say or do because you're an oppressor. And so then you have no grounds to even to talk or have a discussion or even just to have an open, let's discuss this. I'd really like to understand your point of view, but it's no, you can never understand it because you're a professor. And we saw this, there was an example of this with at Yale University a year or so ago when these students, they took a professor's email and what the Yale University was trying to decide, like, what do we tell students they can only wear certain, costumes for Halloween. And the professor, to my knowledge, the professor, what he really said is, hey, listen, we're an educational institution. We shouldn't be involved with telling kids what they can and can't wear. That's really not something we need to worry about as a Ivy League institution. But the kids somehow took what this professor said as a racist comment. And then they were spreading it on social media. Everybody's saying, "Oh, this guy's a racist. Look at this he's such a racist comment." Nobody even read the original context or intent of what the guy was saying in the email. It just got all these kids hyped up that this professor was a racist. So the professor, by the way, is a liberal Democrat who voted for Barack Obama, comes out and he's like, listen, I want to understand where you're coming from. I don't understand how you took this the wrong way. Let's go out in the courtyard and have a discussion. And so they're out there and these students start surrounding this guy and they're saying that his email caused them physical harm, because he said something that offended them. And then you see one of the students, she gets said some of the most hateful things, basically saying like, I want you to lose your job. I want your entire life destroyed because of this email. And if you watch the video, you can watch a video up on YouTube or wherever you look. The kids were acting like they're having like irrational temper tantrum type behavior over some comments on an email. And I'm like, these are Ivy League college students that are, it looks like 3-year-olds. But this is that type of mentality that if I get excited about something, that my emotions and my feelings right now, if I'm upset and I'm angry and I'm in a frenzy, that's more important than logic or the truth. And you saw that no matter what this guy said, they wouldn't listen to reason because they were so emotionally, charged up from this, what they perceived as racism wasn't racism at all. And the guy ended up losing his job over this, and his wife lost her job. What do you think on this, Dante?
Yeah, and there's a little bit more to that too, Lance, is that guy originally was trying to defend his wife, and I agree with you on his position. And the reality of it is, he gave into mob rule, and unfortunately, I think he was ill-advised in doing that. And if he did that on his own, I bet if you ask him, should you go back and talk to a mob in any situation that you're in, if you try to talk reason to a mob, you're already going to lose the argument. And the reality of it is, don't be afraid to speak the truth, but always be prepared to give an answer. We read about that in Hebrews, but not to like make somebody feel horrible or wrong, but to give them an answer of hope. And and that goes back to the whole thing. But on this Yale thing, Lance, there was a lot of drop balls. Number one, the administration that fired this man and his wife, regardless of his political ambitions or his beliefs, shame on you, to the administration that fired him. The fact that you gave into a bunch of Sallys that sat there and tell you that you have a differing view than I do, and that I have been hurt or I've been wronged or I've been maligned. Who in this God's green earth flipping cares how you feel about what I say? And for those of you that sit there and says, well, Dante, you're an elder, you're in a men's ministry, how dare you be like that? I'm sorry, guys. Take accountability. Read scripture. Thessalonians, if you shall not work, you shall not eat. And the reality of it is, it goes down to the core of what is the exegesis in that scripture. And the idea is, take full accountability for your actions in the land that you are in. Submit yourself to the leadership, to the authority, to the powers of that, even if they're on the political opposite of you. Suck it up. Do what's right as a citizen of the country that you're in, and grow up. I listen to these students that their parents are paying $100,000 a year in tuition, and I want to go to these houses of these parents and slap them across the face for them allowing these children to be educated like that. Lance, I'll tell you a story. I work in commodities. One of these guys that I'm really good friends with outside, we're on political opposite ends. Sometimes over a beer, a glass of wine, we'll go down, like you say, those proverbial rabbit holes, and it'll go into like just, how the heck did we get down here from where we started? And the reality is we get to a point where we just laugh, look at each other, and we just say we're going to agree to disagree. But, there are points where this man is very intelligent, highly educated. And one day we were talking, and he was telling me the problem with universities today is that they forgot to keep teaching ethics.
Oh yeah,
and I think when we look at that,
or they get the bike lock professor teaching their ethics,
Yeah, or the bike lock professor teaching their ethics, but they lose the core of why these things are inherently important. And so, look, as long as, Lance, I'm not threatening your life, and on a phone call or in a conversation or in a protest, literally saying that I'm going to come to your house and I'm going to kill you tonight. As long as I'm not doing that, by the God-given rights of this country that is given to me through the Constitution, through the Bill of Rights, I can say, believe, worship, not worship, do whatever I want any which way of Sunday I decide to do. And the beautiful thing about it is you cannot infringe upon my rights. Somewhere along the line, we forgot about these inherent God-given rights that each of us has been given. And now all of a sudden we're bowing a knee to the woke mob and sitting there saying that we have to apologize for how God made me and what ethnicity or background or whatever rhyme or reason that I came into. And I should feel shamed and impoverished because I have privilege that I should have never been given. And that is just baloney. That is just a lie from the pit of hell. And that does not add up to any part of scripture which I read from Old to New Testament. So I challenge any Christian out there that wants to go over the word to please email me, get my phone number, set up a time, and let's debate truth in scripture on this. And I'm going to tell you, you're going to lose, because you know why? Truth is going to set me free. And the reality of it is we're all sinners. We're all broken. But the bottom line is, people that are sitting there saying that you, based on how you feel, what you share, what you write, is infringing my rights or upsetting me to the point that I need to change your lifestyle and fire you for what you do. Lance, come on, people. Common sense, critical thinking, and just biblical lens. That just doesn't add up. It's missing a mile mark, and that just needs to be called out as despicable, shameful, and unacceptable.
Yep, I agree. Totally agree with that. So what's the fourth false premise here, Dante?
And I really went off on that one. Woo! The fourth false premise is it's everyone's moral obligation to eliminate of all forms of social oppression, which are determined by those who are woke without questioning the logic. See premise 3, moral disengagement and violating ethics and laws are justified for the greater good of eliminating social oppression. So we saw this with the bike lock professor. In recent protests where those who call themselves open, accepting, and tolerant justify violence in favor of their cause. Just 2 days ago, a group of Catholics who were peacefully praying to protect a statue of St. Louis were attacked and beaten. An elderly man was punched by another protester. I mean, Lance, come on, people.
Yeah, I don't get this idea that, and it's been brought up as well too. We were told that we were shamed. I mean, not shamed, but basically, we were told that you cannot go outside. We have to lock down the country because of COVID. Because if you go out, you're going to kill people. So we shut down the country. We shut down the economy. People locked down. Everybody was told stay in their homes, don't come out. Then all of a sudden, when there was a cause that supported a certain political affiliation,
the narrative.
Yeah, the narrative. It's like, oh, now it's fine to come out and let's just hundreds of thousands of people protesting. Don't worry about wearing a mask. Nobody. Now it's fine. But 2 days ago, it was if you dare come outside, how dare you kill one human life? And I remember Andrew Cuomo and a bunch of the Democratic leadership saying one human life. We can't lose one human life. It'd be the fault of the president if we tried to reopen. People go outside and we lose one human life. And then 2 days later, they're like, oh, we're protesting racism. Yeah, everybody go outside. We don't care now. Now that this meets our agenda, let's all do this. And I've challenged my friends both on the left and the right. I said, guys, come on. When you see hypocrisy, call it out as hypocrisy. And don't just call out hypocrisy when it's on the other side. When you see your own political party, your own people doing things or saying things that are hypocritical, you look like the biggest hypocrite if you don't call them out for that. I mean, that's just honest accountability. And I think that's what we have to get to, is we have to get to this point of saying it doesn't matter what my side thinks. If somebody's doing something wrong, if somebody's doing something biblically, morally, or ethically wrong, it doesn't matter what political party they're from. It doesn't matter what narrative or cause they're supporting. We need to call it out and say that is wrong. But what I see too many people doing is they jump on the bandwagon and they're like, oh, this is the cool thing of the day, so I'm just going to support this cool thing of the day. Rather than standing on biblical truth or on ethics or morals or anything like that. And it's just frustrating to me, Dante.
And it should be. I mean, the reality of it is it's a broken world, and it's being manipulated, by outside powers, by inside powers that have a theme or that have been heavily financed in order to promote their social or their socialism or communism a directive. And the reality of it is people wake up. I mean, you want to talk about woke, and when I hear that, it just infuriates me. It infuriates me in the church. It infuriates me in public. And I could sit there and let's be honest, I can understand some of the premise by which these terms are being associated with, and I can get on board with some of them. But to sit there and use that as a defense to shame others, shame on you. And the reality of it is the church has a responsibility, and the mission of the church is to share the good news, the gospel of Jesus Christ. Look, people, whatever side you're on, politically, self-ambition or whatever, we're broken. Each and every one of us. And as a church, we need to stop being political, and we need to stop doing and start doing the mandate that we've been given, is to share the hope, share the good news, share, what we've been doing and what we're called to do as far as being disciples of Jesus Christ. And that's where I'm at in this, Lance.
Yeah.
So
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, we're way over on time. So I think what we're gonna do is we're gonna split this thing into 2 podcasts. We'll release a second podcast because we want to get into, we kind of laid out these false premises and kind of what the problem is. And then I think in the second half, what we want to do is really let's talk about what's the fix to all this. What can we do to kind of fix some of these things that we're seeing going on? So let's do that, Dante. We'll do that in the next podcast and really get into it. But I just want to tell you guys, all you guys, we want to thank you guys for your support. You can head over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, and subscribe. Leave us a great 5-star review. We'd love to hear your comments on this because, this is our perspective. This is kind of what we're seeing. You may disagree with us, and that's fine. We invite you to disagree. We're not going to get hurt feelings, and we're not going to protest you, and we're not going to ask you to get fired if you don't agree with us. We would love to hear your comments on this. You can head over to Instagram or the closed Facebook group. We can discuss this more. But I think we have to get to the point where we can talk about these issues because there's some fundamental things wrong in this country. So stay tuned. In the next podcast, we're really going to talk about what is the fix. How do we fix America? And we've got some pretty good insights on what we think needs to happen based on some evidence-based research. So stay tuned for that next one. And we'll see you next time, guys. Take care and God bless.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the Legacy Dads Podcast with Lance and Dante. Real men, authentic faith. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit legacydads.org and on Facebook.com/LegacyDads and on Twitter @Legacy_Dad. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time on the Legacy Dads Podcast. Real men, authentic faith.